Okay, so the first culture that we are going to look at is surface culture. And the surface culture focuses on different cultures' food, the way they dress, music they listen to, holidays, the way they talk, dance, hairstyles, and the different stories that they tell growing up. So the first question that I'm going to ask you is, where did you live? Did you live in an urban, suburban, or rural community? And geographically, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a rural community of Frankfort, Kansas. Geographically, I guess it's the center of the United States and farming country, and I mean, part of the Flint Hills, rolling hills, lots of streams and rivers, but definitely a very rural farming community.
Awesome. How would you characterize the social class that you grew up in?
Social class?
Yeah.
I'd say Frankfort, Kansas. Pretty much middle income, middle class, lower middle class, socioeconomic culture. Very, very Caucasian. Everything was geared to really supporting the farm industry.
Okay, what would you say, like, your family, what social class would you say you were in?
Middle class.
Okay. What did it mean in terms of quality of life? Your social class.
Quality of life. I mean, I definitely learned the value of money, but I always felt like I had what I needed. I felt like there were times, in the 80s when crop prices were low and interest rates were high, that I remember that mom and dad, it was a struggle for 3 or 4 years, but in general, I had a very good quality of life with great parents.
Sweet. Okay, third question is, what are some of your family traditions, such as what, like, holidays did you celebrate, the different foods that you ate, different rituals that you did growing up?
Okay. I think we're pretty typical of most families. We celebrated all the major holidays. I had a Christian upbringing, although my parents weren't devoutly religious. They're definitely what I would call Christmas and Easter churchgoers.
Uh-huh.
But the traditions I remember the most is we always spent Christmas Eve with my grandparents on my mom's side, which were Marysville, Kansas. So we'd spend all day, and my cousins would come back, and that was always a lot of fun. We did that every Christmas Eve, and then Christmas Day was with my grandparents on the Jones side, and with my aunt, a few of my aunts and uncles and things. But really, for us, when I think about what was probably bigger in my family, what I enjoyed the most was upland bird season was always the second weekend of November, and all of my male cousins would come back to our farm, and we would hunt all weekend. And those are some of my best memories growing up, just because of my cousins and spending time with my dad.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that you guys did that.
Yep. It stopped, Sierra, you went home quite a few times with me.
Yeah.
But it stopped probably right when we moved to Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you say that you continue these traditions today? Kind of, not really.
Not really. I think a lot of those have drifted because we've lived away, all your entire life.
Yeah.
And so, in a lot of ways, we've started our own traditions. So Christmas Day is always at our house. Christmas, the Christmas Eve pajamas, spending every Thanksgiving Day with the Supers. Now, our good friends from Chicago. So I think we started a lot of our own traditions, but our traditions really just center around, the six of us.
Yeah.
Really, and our traditions, we don't really necessarily have any traditions anymore that extend into our grandparents because we've been away for so long.
Yeah, I agree. So the next culture, level of culture is shallow culture. So the first question I'm going to ask is, what did your parents, neighbors, and other authority figures tell you respect looked like?
I grew up very much. Well, my dad was, or your grandpa was in the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
I was also an only child, so I got a lot of parenting.
Right.
But we were always taught to treat people with respect, and the golden rule definitely applied. We treat others as we expect to be treated. But I grew up in a time where when I would talk to my elders or older people in the communities, it was yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
I was always taught to open the doors for women.
Yeah.
I was always taught, probably the biggest thing though was just how to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
Working for your grandfather every day, side by side, taught me the value of hard work. And then also, his close friends and people in the community, when I would go work for them, I was a direct reflection of him, and he always made sure that I understood that and that I acted appropriately, and I always worked hard for whoever I went and worked for.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's kind of a roundabout answer, but yeah, definitely respect and values, please, thank yous, never take anything for granted, respect for money, understanding where it comes from, how hard people work, lending helping hand when needed.
For sure.
All those things. Yep, all those things were taught.
That's awesome. Okay, so the second one is, how are you trained to, I don't know if trained is the right word, but to respond to different emotional displays such as crying, anger, and happiness?
How was I brought up to respond?
Yeah, like...
Yeah, well, there's not, I would say, if our family had one fault, it was that we don't show emotion.
Uh-huh.
And we don't necessarily share our feelings and things like that. So, really never cried. Crying really wasn't...
Well, I mean, I even know that today with Grandma. Like, she doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's no real... Yeah, we don't cry. I'd say very... I mean, we get angry, we get mad, but we never really come out and say what we mean because it's just easier to pretend things never happened. So,
yeah.
I'd say that's the best thing about that ever happened to me was with Mom. She really taught me how to express my emotions and things so I don't keep things bottled up. But your grandma and grandpa, they bottled.
Oops. Okay, the next one is, what earned you praise as a child? So the third question under shallow culture is, what earned you praise as a child?
I always got praise for good grades.
Mm-hmm.
And I got good, as you know, I was valedictorian in my class, so I always got really good grades.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I had good behaviors in class. I don't think I ever had a good parent-teacher conference, but at least I had good grades.
Yeah.
And then, all my sports accomplishments that I had always earned me good praise. Getting into West Point was another one. I had, it was more, what got me praise was probably more the things that I accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
More than anything else. Yeah. It wasn't necessarily just praise for working hard or being. So, like I said, we don't really express feelings.
Right. Okay, yeah. So the next level of culture is our deep culture. Our deep culture is our views of good and bad that guides our ethics, spirituality, health, and theories of group harmony. So, the first question I have is, how does your family view decision making? And these questions can be from now, so like with you and Mom, or they can be from when you were growing up?
Oh, how does the family view decision making? Well, I'd say your mom and I, one of the benefits that mom and I have had is the fact that we have raised our family, and we've always lived away, so we've never had anybody that we could depend on for help. So
yeah.
It's always just been the two of us. So we have always, not only are we best friends, but we're partners too. So I mean, I don't make decisions without mom, and mom doesn't make decisions without me. We talk through the issues and the pros and cons of a decision, and we make it together, and it's always worked. Doesn't mean that the decisions have always been right, but you know what? We've always made them together.
Yeah.
I would say the other thing, when growing up with grandma and grandpa, or my mom and dad, I really wasn't involved in any of the decision making. No, really, and not, they wouldn't talk about a lot of those things in front of me either, about major decisions. Now, I will say that when it came time for me to make decisions on my own, whether it was going to college or West Point or whatever, they were always very supportive, and they never really pressured me. West Point's a good one. I know Grandpa and Grandma both were just dying for me to go because they knew what a tremendous opportunity it was.
Right.
But when I decided not to go and just go to Kansas State, they supported me in that. And that, something today, if for you girls, if you had an opportunity like that, I believe that I would really try to talk you into it. Ultimately, it would be your decision.
Yeah.
But they never really put a lot of pressure on me to reconsider anything. They let me make my decision, and I moved on. So
I like
really
that.
Yeah.
So you talked about it earlier about like going to church and things, but do you and your family believe in a higher power? Was one of the questions.
Well, I do.
Yeah, I mean, I do too.
Yeah, very, very much. I'm Catholic. Have Christian beliefs. When we talk to Grandma and Grandpa, I think they do believe in God, but they don't necessarily believe in hell or any of those other pieces, right? They kind of believe in all the positives and none of the rough stuff, right? So, but you know what? Religion was never a foundation in our family that we talked about growing up. I didn't really become solid with my religious beliefs until I started dating your mom.
Right.
And when I converted to Catholicism through marriage prep and all of that, those educational pieces. So,
awesome.
That's definitely changed.
Yeah. So, and then the last question is, do you value collectivism or individualism, and why?
So collectivism or individualism?
Yes.
I'm not really sure how to answer that. I really believe that probably individualism. Quite frankly, I think people, if they work hard and they really work to set themselves apart, they should be rewarded for it, right?
Yeah.
And I think in our society, hard work and dedication to something, whatever that might be, whether it's sacking groceries or whether it's putting a man on the moon, somebody who works really hard should be recognized and rewarded for that.
I agree.
I don't necessarily believe that, and this could be I might not necessarily, the definition of collectivism in its broadest context, where if you have a team, I also believe in team.
Right.
But you know what? Everyone needs to pull their weight and work equally hard. I don't believe that somebody should just be sucked along because you've got 2 or 3 really strong teammates and everybody else can ride their coattails. So I fundamentally believe that hard work and dedication should be rewarded for the individual.
Okay, I agree with that.
And that's why I have such a hard time with the current, with the current where society's at, where uh, everybody gets a trophy just
Yeah.
for showing it. Take from those who have it and give it to those who have not, right?
Yeah.
Because because for whatever, by some society's definition, they haven't been given the same opportunities as others.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I think everyone possesses the ability to pull themselves up through hard work and dedication. So really long-winded answer, but that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview with me.
You bet. That's it?
So for the summary portion of this interview, to just sum it all up, the first one that I have highlighted was from surface culture, and it was how would you characterize the social class that you grew up in, and what did it mean in terms of your quality of life. So my dad talked about how he was lower to middle class. His city was majority Caucasian, and um, everybody was supporting the farming industry. He learned the value of money, but always was usually okay and had what he needed. I would say for me, my family grew up in more middle to upper class, but I did get to experience diversity when my family would move from place to place, because there are some cities that we were living more in the city, and then other places where we were living in the suburbs, so we got to see the difference between the two. Um, for shallow culture, the question that I'm looking at is how are you trained to respond to different emotional displays such as crying, anger, and happiness? Well, my dad talked about how his family didn't really express their emotions, mainly because his dad was in the Marines and he never really showed his emotions, so then that led my dad to be sort of the same way. Um, he talked about how he never really opened up to emotions and feelings until he married my mom. Um, and still, like, he doesn't really cry, but now he lives in a house of all girls, so crying is a thing, and I think he's more open to discussing emotions because we do have a more open household and more open family dynamic. The next question is from Deep Culture, and it was, how does your family view decision making? And he kind of answered this as how him and my mom viewed decision making, and he talked about how it was something that they have always had to do together because they were always moving and had no one to really depend on except each other. So they made their decisions together, and I even remember sometimes when they would include us into the decision making because, for example, I was the tame child of the family and didn't really do much that was rebellious. So I didn't really have a curfew, and this was something that was discussed with them. And as long as I texted them, called them, kept them up to date with where I was at, they were usually okay with me staying out later. Versus my sister, she is more rebellious, and so she gets a curfew. But like this was discussed between my parents first, and then they bring us into the conversation, which I really respect. That was not really a thing with my dad and his parents because his parents are more closed off. They discuss it between each other, and they kind of just tell my dad this is the way it is and this is how it's going to be. And so, yeah. The next part of this is the synthesis. The first question is, how are the responses from your family different or like your own? Well, I said that my dad's responses were very similar to my own for the surface and culture, the surface and shallow culture, but I disagreed with him on his response to collectivism and individualism because he thought individualism, um, he valued individualism more, whereas I tend to think I value collectivism more, and that's because when I think of collectivism, I think of collaborating and working as a group for a final goal, whereas he thought however much we work, that's going to get us places. For the second one, what did you learn about yourself from these interviews and why you think as you do? From these interviews, I learned that I am a lot like my dad when it comes to our upbringing, where social class is involved, but that some things were very different because he is an only child and I lived in a house full of girls. I have 3 sisters, and that alone is just a different family dynamic. And I lived in a suburban area and in the city where he was a very rural area. My parents were always there for me when I needed them to talk about my feelings, whereas his wasn't as much. And I think maybe because his family didn't open up as much as a child, that has helped him want to do it with us, with his own kids, so that maybe in our futures we'll do that with our kids and our families. The next question is, what impact might this have on you as a culture responsive teacher? I just said, I think knowing what I know about my dad and his upbringing, and also living through my upbringing, I'm going to be able to be more culturally aware. I think that is always really important to know about many different situations, like how people grew up, and like the different places they grew up, because those different places are going to provide them with different experiences. And with those experiences, you'll be able to have multiple perspectives to try to understand why your students what they might be going through, and how you might be able to help.